Daeho Kim stood on the bridge of the UES Resilience, staring at the massive view screen that showed nothing but stars and darkness. He had been commanding this ship for 3 years now, leading humanity's first deep space mission to find other intelligent life. Today felt different, though. Today something was going to happen. "Commander," called Sora Park from her science station. "I'm picking up a signal. It's not natural." Her voice carried excitement mixed with nervousness. As the ship's xenobiologist, she had been waiting for this moment her entire career. Daeho walked over to her station, his boots clicking on the metal floor. "What kind of signal?" "It's a distress call. The pattern repeats every 30 seconds. It's coming from the Kepler 442 system, about 6 hours away at maximum speed." Sora's fingers danced across her console, bringing up wave patterns and data streams. Min-Soo Lee, the tactical officer, turned around in his chair. "Commander, we should be careful. A distress call could be a trap. Or it could be exactly what we came out here to find," replied Daeho. He looked around at his crew. These people had left Earth knowing they might never return. They deserved to make history. "Set course for the signal, maximum speed." Hanul Choi, the chief engineer, spoke up from the back of the bridge. "Sir, the engines are running perfectly. We can be there in 5 hours if we push a little harder." "Do it." The next 5 hours felt like days. The crew checked and rechecked every system. They ran through first contact protocols that had been written by people who had never actually met an alien. They prepared translation equipment, medical scanners, and diplomatic gifts. Everything had to be perfect. When they finally reached the Kepler 442 system, what they found took their breath away. Floating in the darkness was a ship unlike anything humans had ever built. It was huge, maybe 10 times the size of the Resilience. The hull looked like it was made of crystal, with soft light glowing from inside. Beautiful patterns covered the surface, flowing like water. "My God," whispered Jiwoo Nam, the communications specialist. "It's incredible." The alien ship was clearly damaged. Pieces of crystal floated around it, and several sections showed signs of impact damage. Whatever had happened here, these beings needed help. "I'm detecting life signs," reported Sora. "Hundreds of them. The atmosphere inside appears to be breathable for humans, though I recommend we wear suits just in case." Daeho nodded. "Open a channel. Let's see if they can understand us." Jiwoo worked at his station for several minutes. "I'm broadcasting on multiple frequencies, standard mathematical sequences, prime numbers, basic physics. If they're intelligent, they should recognize the patterns." They waited. The bridge was completely silent except for the soft hum of the ship's systems. Then, suddenly Jiwoo's console lit up. "Commander, they're responding. The signal is complex, but there's definitely intelligence behind it. They're trying to communicate." Over the next hour, both ships worked to establish basic communication. The aliens were clearly advanced. Their computers quickly figured out human language patterns and began sending simple messages in English. "We are hurt. We need help. You are safe with us." Daeho smiled. This was exactly how first contact should happen. Both sides being careful but friendly. "Tell them we want to help. Ask if we can come aboard their ship." "Come, we wait for you." An hour later, Daeho led a team of 6 people through the airlocks connecting the 2 ships. The alien vessel was even more beautiful inside than outside. The walls were smooth crystal that glowed softly with their own light. The air was warm and smelled like flowers. They were met by 3 aliens who looked like they had stepped out of a fantasy story. They were tall and thin, with skin that seemed to change color in the light. Their eyes were large and completely black. When they moved, they seemed to flow rather than walk. The lead alien stepped forward and spoke in perfect English. "I am Felteris. Welcome to our ship. We are grateful for your help. I'm Commander Daeho Kim. This is my crew. We're happy to help however we can." Felteris smiled, though the expression looked strange on his alien features. "You are the first humans we have met in person. We have been watching your broadcasts for many months. We are curious about your species." Sora stepped forward, unable to contain her excitement. "We're curious about you too. What do you call yourselves? We are Velithrans. We come from a system many light years from here. Our ship was damaged when we hit something in space. Debris that we could not see in time. Hanul examined the damage to their ship's systems. We can help fix this. Our technology might be different, but engineering is engineering. As the two groups worked together over the following hours, Deho noticed something strange. Every time he asked about meeting their leader, the Velithrans became uncomfortable. Veltaris would change the subject or suddenly remember something urgent they needed to do. We would like to meet with whoever is in charge of your ship, Deho said, finally. It's important for our two species to have proper diplomatic contact. The three Velithrans looked at each other. Their skin colors shifted, becoming darker. Veltaris spoke carefully. Our queen is indisposed at the moment. She is dealing with important matters and cannot meet with guests right now. When will she be available? It is difficult to say. Perhaps tomorrow, or the day after. These matters are very complex. Deho found this answer strange, but he didn't want to push too hard on their first meeting. Maybe their queen was injured in the accident, or maybe their culture had special rules about meeting outsiders. Over the next few days, the human crew worked closely with the Velithrans to repair their ship. The aliens were friendly and eager to learn about human technology. They shared information about their own science and culture. Everything seemed normal except for one thing. Whenever Daiho was near certain areas of the ship, Velithran guards would suddenly appear and politely redirect him to other areas. When he asked about these sections, he was told they were sacred spaces or areas under repair, or private quarters that outsiders cannot enter. The strange part was that other members of his crew could go to these same areas without any problems. Zora had been given tours of their biological research labs. Minsu had been shown their weapons and defense systems. Hanul had worked directly on their engine systems in areas that Daiho was told were too dangerous for visitors. It's like they're specifically avoiding me, Daiho told Yunji Yang, the ship's psychologist, during a private meeting in his quarters. Maybe their culture has rules about meeting leaders, Yunji suggested. Some species might have very formal protocols. But it's not just their queen. It's like entire sections of their ship become off-limits whenever I'm around. Yesterday, I was talking to a group of their scientists. The moment I mentioned wanting to see more of their ship, they all suddenly remembered urgent work they had to do. Yunji made notes on her tablet. Have you noticed any patterns? Specific areas they don't want you to see? That's just it. There's no pattern. It seems random, except that it always happens when I'm involved. The rest of the crew can go anywhere, meet anyone, see anything they want. What Deho didn't know was that his observations were correct. Deep in the crystal ship, Queen Nalthara sat in her private chambers, watching security feeds of the human crew. Her advisors had warned her about the visitors, but she had insisted on seeing them for herself. When the first images of humans had appeared on her screens, Nalthara had felt something she had never experienced before, a strange pulling sensation, like gravity but focused on her mind rather than her body. The humans looked so different from any species she had encountered, yet there was something about them that made her want to keep watching. Then she had seen their leader, Commander Daeho Kim. The moment his image filled her screen, Nalthara had felt her control slip. Her mind became focused on his every movement, his every expression. She found herself memorizing the way he walked, the sound of his voice, the confident way he carried himself. This was dangerous. This was something that threatened everything she was, everything she had built. So she had given orders to her crew, keep the human commander away from her at all costs. Her advisors had not questioned the order. They trusted their queen completely. If she said the human leader was dangerous, then he was dangerous. They created barriers, invented excuses, and diverted his attention whenever he came too close to areas where she might be. But Nalthara knew the truth. The danger wasn't that the human might hurt her. The danger was something much worse, something that went against everything she understood about herself and her species. Back on the human ship, Daeho continued to puzzle over the situation. He spent hours reviewing the security footage and conversation logs, trying to understand What was happening? Commander, Jiwoo called out during their evening briefing. I've been analyzing their communication patterns. There's something interesting. What did you find? They have been monitoring our communications for months before we met them. Their computers had already created translation protocols for human languages. They knew we were coming long before we picked up their distress signal. This was news to everyone. Sora looked up from her notes. If they knew we were coming, why didn't they contact us directly? Maybe they were afraid, suggested Minsu. 2 weeks had passed since first contact with the Velithrans, and Daiho was becoming more frustrated each day. Every attempt to meet their queen ended the same way. Polite excuses, sudden emergencies, or areas of the ship that mysteriously became forbidden just as he approached them. Commander, Jiwoo said during the morning briefing, I've made some progress with their communication systems. The Velithrans have been very open about sharing their technology. That's good news. What did you learn? Jiwoo pulled up data on the main screen. Their translation technology is incredible. It doesn't just convert words from one language to another. It analyzes thought patterns, emotional context, even cultural background. They've been studying human communication for months. Sora leaned forward in her chair. Months? How is that possible? They intercepted our television broadcasts, radio signals, internet communications, anything we send out into space. Their computers have been learning human languages, studying our behavior patterns, even analyzing our entertainment media. This revelation made Daiho pause. So they know more about us than we know about them. Much more, Jiwoo confirmed. They understand our culture, our history, our way of thinking. But here's the interesting part. When I asked them about their analysis of human behavior, they became very uncomfortable. Almost like they had learned something they didn't want to know. Minsu crossed his arms. What kind of something? I don't know. Every time I brought up specific details about their research on humans, they would change the subject. Daiho felt like he was trying to solve a puzzle with half the pieces missing. The Velithrans were friendly and helpful with everything except the most basic diplomatic courtesy of meeting their leader. And now it seemed like their extensive study of humanity had revealed something that made them uncomfortable. After the briefing, Daiho decided to try a more direct approach. He would position himself in areas where he had seen the queen watching him and wait. If she was curious enough to observe him, maybe he could turn that curiosity into an actual meeting. He started spending time in the observation lounges that faced the Velithran ship. He would bring work with him, or read reports, making it look natural while actually watching for any signs of movement in the alien vessel. It didn't take long to establish a pattern. Every day around the same time, a figure would appear at one of the upper windows of the Velithran ship, always at a distance, always ready to disappear quickly, but definitely watching. She's curious about me, Daiho told Yoonji during one of their sessions. But something is stopping her from actually meeting me. Fear, maybe? Yoonji suggested. Some cultures have very strong taboos about outsiders. It doesn't feel like fear. It feels more like... Daiho paused, trying to find the right words. Like she wants to meet me but can't allow herself to do so. Like there's some kind of internal conflict. Yoonji made notes. That's interesting. What makes you think that? The way she watches me. If she was afraid, or if this was just about cultural rules, she wouldn't keep coming to the window. She would just stay away completely. But she watches me every day, always from a safe distance. What Daiho didn't know was that Queen Nalthara was indeed fighting an internal battle. Every day she told herself she would stop watching the human commander. Every day she found herself drawn back to the observation windows. There was something about him that she couldn't understand or explain. The way he moved with confidence but without aggression. The way he treated his crew with respect rather than dominance. The way he seemed genuinely interested in learning about her people rather than just using them. But most disturbing was the way her mind reacted when she watched him. Her thoughts became focused, almost obsessed. She found herself thinking about him during important meetings, wondering what he was doing when she couldn't see him, analyzing every gesture and expression. This was not normal Velithran behavior. Her species valued control, logic, and emotional balance. What she was experiencing was chaotic and unpredictable. It was dangerous, so she continued to watch from a distance while giving orders to keep him away from her. It was the only way she could satisfy her curiosity without risking whatever was happening to her mind. Meanwhile, Deho was developing his own obsession. He started keeping detailed logs of every interaction with the Velithrans, looking for patterns and clues. He studied their body language, their speech patterns, the way their skin colors change during conversations. "I think their skin color changes are like our facial expressions," he explained to Sora during one of their joint research sessions. "Different colors seem to indicate different emotional states." Sora pulled up her biological scans. "That makes sense. I've detected specialized cells in their skin that can alter pigmentation rapidly. It's like they have a secondary communication system. What colors have you noticed?" "Bright colors seem to indicate positive emotions. Happiness, excitement, curiosity. Darker colors appear when they're uncomfortable or stressed. And there's this particular shade of deep blue that I've only seen when they're talking about their queen." "Deep blue. What do you think that means?" Sora hesitated. "If I had to guess, I'd say it indicates some kind of protective instinct, like they're worried about her." That evening, Deho decided to test this theory. He approached a group of Velithron, scientists who were working on repairs to their navigation system. As usual, they were friendly and welcoming. "How is your queen doing?" he asked casually. "I hope she wasn't injured when your ship was damaged." Immediately, all three aliens' skin shifted to the deep blue color Sora had described. They looked at each other nervously. "Our queen is..." "She is well," said one of them, whose name was Keth Moran. "She is very busy with important duties. I understand. As a commander myself, I know how demanding leadership can be. Perhaps she would benefit from talking to someone who understands those pressures." The blue color deepened. That would not be appropriate. Our queen has her own advisors for such matters." "Of course. I didn't mean to overstep. It's just that in human culture, leaders often find it helpful to speak with other leaders. We face similar challenges." Now a fourth Velithron joined the conversation. Deho recognized him as Mor Gethys, one of their senior officers. "Commander Kim, you are very kind to offer. But our queen has specifically requested that she not be disturbed during this time." "Specifically requested? She knows I want to meet with her?" The moment the words left his mouth, Deho realized he had made a mistake. All four Velithran's skin colors shifted rapidly through several shades before settling on a dark, almost black hue. "We should return to our work," Mor Gethys said quickly. "There is still much to repair." As the aliens scattered, Deho realized he had learned something important. The queen wasn't just avoiding him through cultural protocol or busy schedule. She had given specific orders about him. She knew he wanted to meet her and she was actively preventing it. But why? That night, he couldn't sleep again. He found himself walking the corridors of his ship, thinking through everything that had happened. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to form a picture, but it was unlike anything he had expected. The Velithrans had been studying humans for months. They knew human culture, human behavior, human psychology. They were friendly and cooperative, with his entire crew except when it came to him meeting their queen. And now he knew that the queen was specifically avoiding him, not just following general protocols. Something about him, specifically him, was causing this reaction. Around midnight, he decided to try something different. Instead of trying to approach the Velithran ship or asking to meet the queen, he would send a message, something direct but non-threatening. He went to the communications center and recorded a simple message. "Your Majesty, I am Commander Deho Kim of the human vessel Resilience. I want you to know that I respect your wishes to maintain privacy. However, as representatives of our respective species, I believe it would be beneficial for us to communicate in some way. If a face-to-face meeting is not possible, perhaps we could exchange messages. I am genuinely interested in learning about your people and sharing information about mine. Please know that I mean no disrespect by this request." He sent the message directly to the Velithran ship's communication system. The response came back within an hour, but not in the way he expected. Instead of a message from the Queen, he received a communication from Velteris, the first Velithran he had met. Commander Kim, your message has been received. Our Queen asks me to thank you for your courtesy and understanding. She also wants you to know that your desire for communication is appreciated. However, the situation is more complex than it appears. There are factors at work that cannot be easily explained. She asks for your continued patience. Daeho stared at the message for a long time. It was polite and diplomatic, but it told him almost nothing. More complex than it appears? What factors? And why couldn't they be explained? He was about to send a follow-up message when his console chimed with an incoming transmission. This one was different. It was marked as originating from a private channel, not the ship's main communication system. The message was brief. You ask questions that cannot be answered safely. Some truths are dangerous for both our peoples. Please understand that distance. 3 weeks after first contact, Daeho was no closer to understanding the mystery of the Velithran Queen. If anything, the situation had become more puzzling. The private messages had stopped coming after that final, cryptic warning about protection. But the watching continued. Every day he would see her figure at the observation windows of her ship. Sometimes she would stand there for hours, seemingly focused on whatever he was doing. Other times she would appear briefly and then quickly retreat. It was like she was fighting a constant internal battle between curiosity and caution. His crew had continued working closely with the Velithrans on various projects. The aliens were remarkably open about sharing their technology and knowledge. Everyone except Daeho had been invited to tour different sections of their ship, participate in their scientific experiments, and even attend some of their cultural ceremonies. It's like you're the only human they're afraid of, Tae-Young Shin, the expedition's linguist, said during their morning meeting, and I think I might know why. Everyone turned to look at him. Tae-Young had been working more closely with the Velithrans than anyone else, trying to understand their language and culture. I've been analyzing their linguistic patterns, he continued, and I've discovered something interesting about how they categorize other species. He brought up a display showing complex linguistic structures. Velithran language has very specific honorific systems. They have different ways of referring to other beings based on perceived threat levels, social status, and something they call influence potential. Influence potential? Asked Sora. That's where it gets interesting. When they talk about humans, in general they use terms that translate roughly to fascinating strangers or unpredictable allies. But when they specifically talk about Commander Kim, the linguistic structure changes completely. Daeho leaned forward. Changes how? They use honorifics that don't translate directly to any concept we have in human language. The closest I can get is something like one who compels, or bearer of irresistible influence. But even that doesn't capture the full meaning. Min-Su frowned. That sounds almost like they think he has some kind of power over them. That's exactly what it sounds like, Tae-Young agreed. But not power in the sense of authority or force. More like psychological influence, something that affects their minds in ways they can't control. This revelation sent a chill through the room. Daeho had suspected something like this after the Queen's cryptic messages, but hearing it confirmed through linguistic analysis made it feel much more real. Su Jin Huang, their cultural attaché, had been quietly listening to the discussion. Now she spoke up. I've been studying their art and literature, and I think I've found something related to this. She activated her own display, showing images and text from Velithran cultural databases. Their mythology and literature contain recurring themes about certain types of beings. They call them Kethnalar in their language, which roughly translates to those who call to the soul. The images showed artistic representations of various creatures, but none that looked particularly human-like. However, the descriptions were unsettling. According to their stories, these beings possess what they call the call that cannot be refused. They're described as having features that burn themselves into the soul and voices that echo in the mind long after they have stopped speaking. Those are just myths, though, right? Asked Hanul. That's what I thought at first. But the more I studied their culture, the more I realized that these stories aren't presented as fantasy. They're written like historical accounts or warnings, like their ancestors actually encountered beings like this. Yunji, who had been taking notes throughout the discussion, looked up. This could explain a lot about their behavior. If their culture has stories about beings who can influence their minds involuntarily, they might be naturally cautious around anything that seems to fit that pattern. But why just me? Daeho asked. Why not the rest of the crew? It was a good question, and nobody had a clear answer. They spent the next several hours analyzing every aspect of their interactions with the Velithrans, looking for clues about what made Daeho specifically trigger their avoidance behavior. That afternoon, Daeho decided to try a different approach. Instead of trying to meet the Queen directly, he would focus on understanding more about Velithran psychology and culture. Maybe if he could understand their perspective, he could find a way to communicate that didn't trigger whatever protective instincts were keeping them apart. He requested a meeting with Morgethus, the senior Velithran officer who seemed most comfortable talking about potentially sensitive topics. They met in one of the conference rooms aboard the Resilience, neutral territory that might make the alien more relaxed. Morgethus, I want to understand something about your people. Daeho began carefully. I've noticed that there seem to be certain protocols about when and how your queen meets with outsiders. Can you help me understand these better? The alien's skin shifted to a cautious yellow-green color. Our queen is very important to our civilization, Commander Kim. We must be careful about who she interacts with and under what circumstances. I understand that completely. As a leader myself, I know how important security and protocol can be. But I get the feeling that this is about more than just standard security measures. Morgethus was quiet for a long moment. His skin color shifted through several hues before settling on a deep, worried blue. Commander, may I speak honestly with you? Please do. Your species possesses certain qualities that make interactions complicated for us. We have studied your people extensively through your communications and broadcasts. What we have learned is both fascinating and concerning. Concerning in what way? Humans are unpredictable in ways that our minds find compelling. Your emotional complexity, your behavioral patterns, the way you think and solve problems. All of these things create what we might call psychological resonance. Daeho felt like he was finally getting closer to the truth. Psychological resonance? When Velithrans encounter certain types of minds, especially those that are complex and unpredictable, we can become focused on them. Our attention becomes drawn to these individuals in ways that can interfere with our normal thought processes. And you think humans have this effect on your people? Morgethus's skin darkened further. We know humans have this effect. We have observed it in ourselves since we began studying your communications. But the effect is much stronger when we are in direct contact with you. Is that why your queen won't meet with me? Our queen is especially sensitive to these influences because of her position and her mental training. She has developed heightened awareness and emotional sensitivity as part of her leadership development. This makes her more susceptible to psychological resonance. Daeho was beginning to understand, but the implications were troubling. So you're saying that direct contact with humans, especially me, could somehow interfere with her ability to think clearly? More than interfere, Morgethus said quietly. It could fundamentally alter her priorities and decision-making processes. She could become so focused on human welfare, specifically your welfare, that she would be unable to properly govern our people. The weight of this revelation settled over Daeho like a heavy blanket. He wasn't just dealing with diplomatic protocol or cultural differences. He was dealing with a fundamental incompatibility between human psychology and Velithran mental processes. Has this happened before with other species? Rarely, and never to this extent. There have been isolated cases of individuals becoming overly focused on certain alien species, but never entire populations reacting to another species the way we react to humans. What makes humans different? Morgethys hesitated. Your minds are chaotic in ways that ours find irresistible. You have emotional depth and complexity that creates patterns our consciousness interprets as endlessly fascinating puzzles. And you have something else. What? You have what our scientists call psychic static. We cannot read your thoughts or predict your behavior the way we can with most species. This creates a mystery that Velothran minds find addictive. Deho felt a chill run down his spine. Addictive? The more we try to understand human thought patterns, the more interesting they become. It's like trying to solve a puzzle that becomes more complex each time we think we understand it. For individuals like our queen, who have highly developed, analytical minds, this can become an obsession. And I specifically trigger this more than the rest of my crew. You are a leader. Your psychological patterns are more complex, more layered. You make decisions that affect others, you carry responsibility. You balance multiple priorities. These traits make your mental patterns even more compelling to study. Now Deho understood why the queen watched him, but couldn't meet him. Every time she observed him, she was essentially feeding an addiction that could compromise her ability to lead her people. She was trapped between curiosity and duty, between desire and responsibility. Is there any way around this? He asked. Any way for our species to interact safely? Morgethys' skin shifted to a sad purple color. We do not know. This is why our queen struggles with this situation. She wants to establish proper diplomatic relations with your species. She recognizes. The crisis began without warning on a Tuesday morning. Deho was in his quarters reviewing reports when the ship's emergency alarms started blaring. He rushed to the bridge to find his crew scrambling at their stations. What's the situation? He demanded. Gravitational anomaly, replied Woojin Park, the navigation officer. His face was pale with worry. Something massive just appeared on our sensors. It's pulling both ships toward it. The main screen showed a terrifying sight. What looked like a small black hole had materialized in space near their position. But this wasn't a natural black hole. The gravitational field was pulsing in regular patterns, almost like it was artificial. Can we break free? Deho asked. Not with our current engine power, Hanul reported from the engineering station. The gravitational pull is increasing every minute. We have maybe 6 hours before we reach the point of no return. Minsu was analyzing tactical options. The Velothran ship is in the same situation. Their engines are more powerful than ours, but not powerful enough to escape this pull. Open a channel to their ship, Deho ordered. Within minutes, Veltaris appeared on the screen. The alien's skin was fluctuating rapidly between different shades of blue and purple, indicating extreme stress. Commander Kim, we are facing a grave situation. Our scientists believe this is a collapsed dimensional gateway, very dangerous and highly unstable. Can we work together to escape it? We are analyzing possibilities now, but the calculations are extremely complex. We will need our best mathematical minds working on this problem. What Veltaris didn't say, but Deho understood, was that their best mathematical mind was Queen Nalthara. She would have to be directly involved in solving this problem if they were going to survive. We need to combine our resources, Deho said. Our ships, our computers, our people, whatever it takes. Veltaris hesitated. Commander, this would require close cooperation. Very close cooperation. I understand, but we don't have a choice. 2 hours later, the most important meeting in human-Velothran relations was taking place in the main conference room of the Resilience. For the first time since first contact, Queen Nalthara was physically present in the same room as Deho Kim. She was smaller than he had expected, but there was an unmistakable presence about her that commanded attention. Her skin was a deep, controlled silver color, but Deho could see flashes of other hues moving beneath the surface like emotions trying to break through. When their eyes met for the first time, he felt a strange moment of recognition, as if he was looking at someone he had known for years rather than meeting for the first time. Her large, dark eyes seemed to be studying every detail of his face with an intensity that was almost overwhelming. Your Majesty, he said formally. Thank You for coming. I know this is difficult. Commander Kim, she replied, her voice carrying a musical quality that seemed to resonate in his chest. The situation requires that we put aside personal concerns for the survival of both our crews. But even as she spoke, Daeho could see that she was struggling. Her hands were clasped tightly together and her skin colors were shifting constantly. She kept her distance, positioning herself at the far end of the conference table as far from him as possible, while still being in the same room. The next 4 hours were the most intense of Daeho's life. Working together, the combined human and Velithran teams tackled the gravitational anomaly problem. Queen Nalthara's mathematical abilities were incredible. She could perform calculations in her head that would take human computers minutes to solve, but as they worked, something strange began to happen. The Queen's controlled demeanor started to crack. Her responses became faster, more animated. Her skin colors became brighter and more varied. Most concerning of all, Daeho noticed that she was positioning herself closer to him as the hours passed. What started with her at the far end of the table had gradually shifted until she was sitting directly across from him, leaning forward, with increasing intensity as they discussed calculations and strategies. Wu Jin, who was working directly with the Queen on navigation calculations, later described the experience as both amazing and unsettling. It was like watching someone become more alive with each passing minute, he said, but also like watching someone lose control of themselves. The breakthrough came when they realized they needed to create a resonance pulse that would destabilize the artificial gravity field. It required precise timing and coordination between both ships' engines, using calculations so complex that even their combined computer systems were struggling. We need to fire our engines in pulses of exactly 2.7 seconds, with intervals of 1.3 seconds between pulses, Queen Nalthara explained, her voice now bright with excitement. The timing must be perfect, or the resonance will collapse and we'll be pulled in even faster. As she spoke, she had moved around the table to stand directly beside Daeho, pointing at calculations on his tablet screen. For the first time, they were close enough to touch. Daeho became acutely aware of her presence. There was something about her that seemed to draw his attention in ways he couldn't explain. The way she moved with fluid grace, the musical quality of her voice, the intensity of her focus as she worked on the problem. He found himself studying her profile as she bent over the calculations, memorizing the way her skin colors shifted with her thoughts. "Commander," she said suddenly, looking up at him, "are you understanding these calculations?" Their faces were only inches apart. For a moment, neither of them moved. Daeho could see his own reflection in her dark eyes, and something in her expression made his breath catch. "Yes," he managed to say. "The timing sequence. I understand." But what he really understood in that moment was why she had been avoiding him. Because whatever psychological resonance the Velithrans experienced when exposed to human minds, he was feeling something similar in response to her. There was a connection forming between them that went beyond simple attraction or curiosity. It was like their minds were synchronizing in ways that felt both natural and dangerous. The escape attempt began an hour later. Both crews worked with desperate precision as they executed the complex plan Queen Nalthara had developed. The timing had to be perfect down to hundredths of a second. "First pulse in 3, 2, 1, mark," she called out over the communication system. The ship's engines fired in perfect synchronization. The artificial gravity field flickered but held. "Second pulse in 3, 2, 1, mark." This time the gravity field visibly wavered. Warning lights flashed on both ships as the unstable dimensional gateway began to react to their interference. "It's working," shouted Hanul from the engineering station. "The gravitational pull is decreasing, but the plan required 17 more synchronized pulses, and the margin for error was getting smaller with each attempt." By the 10th pulse, Queen Nalthara was showing signs of extreme stress. Her skin was cycling through colors so rapidly, it was almost strobing, and her breathing had become rapid and shallow. "Your Majesty, are you all right?" Daeho asked. "I must maintain concentration," she replied, but her voice was strained. "The calculations. They must be precise." 15th pulse in 3, 2, 1 mark. The ships shuddered as their engines fired. The dimensional gateway was beginning to collapse, but they weren't free yet. 2 more pulses were needed, and Queen Nalthara looked like she was about to collapse from the mental strain. 16th pulse in 3, 2, 1 mark. This time something went wrong. The timing was off by a fraction of a second and the resonance began to collapse. Alarms blared on both ships as the gravitational pull suddenly increased. "We're losing it," Wu Jin called out. "The field is destabilizing in the wrong direction, Queen." Nalthara closed her eyes, her hands pressed against her temples. "I can compensate. 1 final pulse, but the timing must be exactly 2.847 seconds from mark. Not 2.8, not 2.9. Exactly 2.847. "Can you be that precise?" Daeho asked. She opened her eyes and looked directly at him. For the first time since they had met, her expression was completely open and unguarded. "Only if you help me count. Your voice. I need to hear your voice counting down." It was in strange request, but there was no time to question it. "Final pulse," Daeho announced to both ships. "Timing will be called by Commander Kim." He watched, the chronometer waiting for the precise moment. Queen Nalthara stood beside him, her eyes closed, listening to his voice. 3, 2, 1, mark. The final pulse fired with perfect precision. The dimensional gateway collapsed with a flash of brilliant light, and suddenly both ships were free, floating in normal space with the stars visible around them. Cheers erupted from both crews over the communication system. They had done it. They had escaped what should have been certain death through cooperation and precise teamwork. But as the celebration continued around them, Daeho noticed that Queen Nalthara had not moved. She was standing beside him, breathing heavily, her skin colors shifting in patterns he had never seen before. "Your Majesty?" he said quietly. She opened her eyes and looked at him. When she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper, but in the chaos of the celebration, only he could hear her. "Do you have any idea what you do to us?" Before he could answer, she collapsed. Yujin Kang, the ship's medical officer, immediately rushed to examine the Queen while Velithran medical personnel were summoned from. An hour after Queen Nalthara regained consciousness, she requested a private meeting with Daeho. Her Velithran advisors looked nervous about this idea, but she insisted. They met in the ship's small diplomatic chamber, with only the 2 of them present. She looked different now. The controlled, distant demeanor was completely gone. Her skin colors shifted constantly, displaying emotions she was no longer trying to hide. When she looked at him, there was something in her eyes that made Daeho's chest tighten with an emotion he couldn't name. "Commander Kim." "Daeho," she began, using his first name for the first time. "What happened during our escape attempt has made it impossible for me to continue hiding the truth from you." "What truth?" She stood up and walked to the small viewport, looking out at the stars. For a long moment, she was quiet. When she finally spoke, her voice carried a sadness that seemed to fill the room. "Do you know what it's like to discover that everything you thought you understood about yourself is wrong? I'm not sure I understand. For my entire life, I have been trained to be logical, controlled, rational. These are the qualities that make a good Velithran leader. We value emotional balance above almost everything else. Our society depends on leaders who can make decisions based on careful analysis rather than impulse or feeling." She turned back to face him, and Daeho could see tears in her large, dark eyes. "But from the moment I first saw images of your species, something changed in me. Something that goes against everything I am supposed to be." "Changed how?" "Sit down, Daeho. Please. What I am about to tell you will be difficult for both of us to understand." He sat in one of the chamber's chairs. She remained standing as if she needed the distance to maintain her composure. "Your species represents something that my people have never encountered before. We are a telepathic race, as you know. We can read the thoughts and emotions of most intelligent species with relative ease. This ability has served us well in building relationships with other civilizations. But you can't read human minds." "That's correct, but it's more than that. Human minds don't just resist our telepathic abilities. They actively interfere with them. When we try to read human thoughts, what we get instead is what our scientists Call psychic static, a chaotic mix of emotions, memories, dreams, and thoughts that creates patterns unlike anything we've ever encountered. She began pacing the small room, her agitation increasing with every word. For most Velithrans, this static is simply confusing and uncomfortable, but for some of us, especially those with highly developed telepathic abilities, the static becomes fascinating, addictive, like a puzzle that becomes more interesting the more we try to solve it. Deho was beginning to understand, but he didn't like where this was heading. And you're one of those with highly developed abilities. I am our most powerful telepath. It's part of what makes me an effective queen. I can sense the emotions and intentions of my advisors, understand the needs of my people, even predict the behavior of other species we encounter. But with humans, she stopped pacing and looked directly at him. With humans, and especially with you, my telepathic abilities don't just fail, they become reversed. Instead of me reading your mind somehow calls to mine, calls to your mind. Every thought pattern you generate, every emotion you feel, every decision you make creates these incredibly complex psychological resonances that my mind interprets as endlessly fascinating patterns. The more I try to understand how your mind works, the more I become focused on you specifically. Her skin colors were now cycling through deep blues and purples, indicating distress and emotional conflict. During our first days of contact, I found myself thinking about you constantly, wondering what you were doing when I couldn't see you, analyzing every gesture, every word, every expression. I began making decisions based not on what was best for my people, but on what might create opportunities for me to observe you more closely. Deho felt a chill run down his spine. That's why you've been avoiding me. Yes, because I realized that prolonged contact with you would compromise my ability to function as a leader. I was becoming obsessed, and that obsession was affecting my judgment in ways that could be dangerous for my entire civilization. She sat down in the chair across from him, finally allowing herself to be at his level, rather than maintaining the psychological advantage of standing. But it's worse than just obsession, Deho. The attraction I feel toward your mind, toward your psychological patterns, is so intense that it overrides my basic survival instincts. What do you mean? During our escape from the gravitational anomaly, when I was working so closely with you, I found myself making choices that prioritized your safety over my own people's safety. When there were moments where I could have optimized the calculations to better protect my own ship, I instead chose options that would better protect yours. The implications of this hit Deho like a physical blow. You're saying that being near me makes you betrays your own species? Not betray exactly, but it does compromise my ability to put my people's interests first. And for a leader, that's essentially the same thing. Tears were now flowing freely down her face, though. The expression was alien and strange on her non-human features. The worst part is that I know this is happening and I still can't stop it. Even now, sitting here talking to you, I can feel my mind becoming more focused on you with each passing minute. Part of me is analyzing ways to extend this conversation, to spend more time near you, even though I know it's dangerous. Deho sat in stunned silence, trying to process everything she had told him. The mystery of the past few weeks now made perfect sense, but the solution seemed impossible. Is this something that affects all Velithrans, or just you? It affects all of us to some degree, but the effect is strongest in individuals with the most developed telepathic abilities. My advisors experience it as a mild fascination that they can control with effort. But for me, she paused, struggling with the words. For me, it's like psychological gravity. I'm drawn to human minds and, especially to your mind, in ways that I cannot resist through willpower alone. The only solution is distance, but that means our species can never really work together. It's worse than that, she said quietly, because the effect becomes stronger over time. The more contact we have with humans, the more intense the attraction becomes. Eventually, it could lead to the complete breakdown of Velithran society. How? Imagine if your most important leaders, your scientists, your military commanders, all became so focused on pleasing and protecting aliens that they stopped being able to make rational decisions about their own species' welfare. How long do You think human civilization would survive? Daeho understood now why she had been so desperate to avoid him. It wasn't about cultural differences or diplomatic protocol. It was about the survival of her entire species. Has this ever happened before with other species? Never to this extent. There have been isolated cases of individuals becoming overly attached to certain alien species, but nothing approaching what we experience with humans. Your minds are unique in the galaxy, as far as we know. They sat in silence for several minutes, both trying to process the implications of what had been revealed. Finally, Daeho spoke. So what happens now? Queen Nalthara wiped the tears from her face and straightened in her chair. For a moment, the controlled, regal bearing returned. Now our ships must part ways. My people and I will return to our home system and report what we have learned about humanity. We will recommend that diplomatic contact be limited to emergency situations only, with strict protocols to prevent prolonged exposure. And if humans try to establish regular diplomatic relations, we will have to decline. It's not safe for either of our species. The finality of this statement hung in the air between them. Humanity's first contact with an advanced alien civilization was ending not in war or conflict, but in recognition that they were simply too psychologically incompatible to coexist safely. I want you to know, she continued, that this decision causes me great pain. Under different circumstances, I believe our species could have learned much from each other. Your people have qualities that I find not just attractive, but genuinely admirable. Your courage, your adaptability, your emotional complexity, these are things that could have enriched both our civilizations. But the risk is too great. Yes, the risk is too great. As she prepared to leave, Queen Nalthara stopped at the door and looked back at him one final time. Daeho, I want you to understand something. What I feel when I'm near you isn't hatred or fear. It's the opposite. It's a connection so intense, so overwhelming, that it threatens to remake me into someone who would sacrifice everything for your welfare. And that kind of connection, no matter how powerful or meaningful it feels, is too dangerous for a queen to allow herself to experience. After she left, Daeho sat alone in the diplomatic chamber for a long time. He understood now that he had experienced something unprecedented in human history. He had met an alien species that found humanity not too violent, too primitive, or too dangerous in the conventional sense. Instead, they had found humans too compelling, too psychologically fascinating, too emotionally complex. Humanity's greatest strength, their